Now are we good?
Sound check. 1, 2, 3. Season 1, episode 5, and thank you so much for tuning in today. I want to thank every single one of our listeners that has stayed with us through the technical challenges we've had. And if you're new here, we are so grateful to have you here now. Tori, what's going on with you?
Well, I'm still mentally unstable, but I'm mentally unstable and I have a kitten. Say hi. Say hi. Well, her name's, oh, there it is. Her name is Moot, as in Moot Ball Feet Long. She does not want to be held right now, but she's a sweet baby and we love her so much. Okay, Moot, you can go
She's
play.
adorable.
She's
I love her full
literally-
name.
Yeah, that's what you get when your kids name your animals. So
Yeah, I was certain you probably did name that, but you know, it would have been fine if you did.
I would do something like that.
Yeah.
My daughter made a whole list. I think I might have sent it to you.
You did. You did.
I'm glad that's the one we went with and not Orange Sharpie. So
Orange, she is creative, man.
She is. Well, remember one of them was Princess Diana. So
yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that she didn't go with that one and she went with the one that the Moot one. Moot.
So how are you doing today, Selena?
Well, you know, the solar eclipse happened and I was kind of hoping that we'd get a nice little end of the world after that, but we're still here today, so that's unfortunate. And I'm also not happy that it is shave your leg season. Shave your legs more often, because I still am not going to do that consistently ever in my life. And have you ever used one of those cheap Bic razors?
I have, and I've resorted to an electric razor because absolutely not.
Well, that's the only thing I could get at the time because I was already at the Dollar Tree and I was like, screw it, I'm just going to get a package of these because I'm not going to Walmart right now. And you literally have to be so careful when you're shaving your legs or anywhere with these razors because they have made me bleed so many times in my coochie area and everything. And and those things are so scary when you're not intentionally trying to cut yourself, you know?
Trigger warning.
Yeah, TW.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it is. So the month of April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And ironically, Tori and I already picked the episode segments and what we were going to talk about today that is, going to be based around sexual assault and sexual awareness. And that is why the episode's name is Silence is Deadly. I came up with that just the other day because I had so many other titles for it, but this was a banger title. So let's jump in here. I'm going to dive headfirst into this topic because this is such a rough topic overall. And we know our podcast production's name speaks for itself. And so does our intro page with explicit content. But we're throwing that trigger warning in there for you right now. And if this is a topic that you simply cannot handle, please do not watch this topic or watch or listen to this podcast for this episode because it's going to get pretty real. So if you're not somebody that can handle that, then you should definitely not watch this episode today.
You know, this topic is something that really resonates with me since I do work in a field with children, and there's just so much trauma that happens because of abuse, and it's heartbreaking. And I'm really glad we're going to jump into this topic today. Me
too. So do you remember that teacher that we had in middle school and she taught us all throughout middle school? She had been there so long that she would have had our parents as students of hers. And we were pulled into the room and it was time for us to be a part of, it was time for our class. But she pushed back what she had planned for the class that day just to specifically tell us how bad our class was. And she said it was the worst group of middle schoolers that she has ever had in all of her years of teaching in relation
Mm-hmm.
to sex, sexual assault, and sexual harassment.
Yes, I
So we had
remember
to,
that distinctively.
I figured you would, because that was not normal, and it was really telling. If she brought us in just to tell us all that, then there was something definitely wrong, which there truly was something definitely wrong. And we had to deal with boys touching our boobs constantly and calling it flipping the patties. And if you were somebody that didn't allow that, you weren't cool enough, and the boys didn't like you. Our class was truly awful when it came to sexual harassment and sexual assault and even abuse. And at that age, we had no idea how to speak up and get it to stop. I dealt with sexual uh, I dealt with sexual assault straight from a boy that that not only verbally abused me, but he did it in person as well. And I told this boy I had already been sexually assaulted in the past, and he did not care at all. He sexually assaulted me when we were on our way back from a sports thing that we had, and he was just trying so hard, and I was just like, whatever, I didn't have the resources or the knowledge to just figure out what I was supposed to do in that moment. And then throughout high school, he started doing the same thing, and he had a girlfriend then, and I was in a relationship, but he would always make up some excuse as to why he needed a ride home from me. And then he would try to literally have sex with me. And I did not do
Mm-hmm.
that at all. And it was like he made my life a living hell because he just kept doing the puppy dog eyes and come on, please, can you please take me to my house? And he tried to get me to come in, and I'm like, no, I'm here to drop you off, and I'm here till like I'm leaving. So this kid also did this to several people. And Tori, I know you know exactly who I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about.
I sure do. One thing I want to touch on is the bus rides. I hated bus rides because of the whole patty flipping thing, because the boys thought it was hilarious, except I was part of the itty bitty titty committee. So they didn't touch me, but they certainly made comments to me and another girl who you know who I'm speaking
Mhm.
about the state of our flat as glass chest. And I was fine without
Mhm.
being touched because I absolutely did not want that. But I was not fine with being
Mhm.
body shamed over something I had no control over. And adding to the boy who was pressuring you, I remember just so many instances where other girls were saying that he was doing very similar things to them, saying similar things to them, but no one batted an eye because he was cool. And it was like a open secret in the school and in the
Mhm.
class about how this boy was. But he actually did try at one point, I want to say I was 15. He tried to tell people that I had asked to do something to him, but I had laughed so hard when he tried to confront me about this in the hallway that the rumor never took. I was like, "What, bro?" Really?
Bro, come on now.
So it did not work well for him. But he's so easily manipulated and treated other girls in our class terribly.
Yeah, and I grew up with this boy. So
Hmm.
my mom and his mom were best friends. They got pregnant around the same time, so that me and this boy, we were really close um when we were both born. We were super close. So I was even going to his house when his mom would invite my mom to his house. And it just is crazy to me the way that he grew up to start doing that, because he
Hmm.
was raised by his mother. He wasn't
Yeah.
raised by his piece of crap dad. And
Yeah.
so he was just all around not a good person. And anytime you would speak up and say something about it, people were convinced that he would never do such a thing.
Hmm.
And that's just
Hmm.
that pisses me off so much.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's so normal when bringing up things that a predator does.
Mhm. Mhm. And he got his karma, man. He really did.
Mhm.
And I was also sexually assaulted by an adult that I really trusted. He was the stepfather of one of my past friendships. He assaulted me on 3 different occasions, all of which I did tell my friend, and she brushed it off and not she did not want to talk about it. I figured out that it was happening to my friend much more often and to a larger extent than it was happening to me. And so I was very young when this happened, and I didn't want my best friend at the time mad at me if I told, if I spoke up to her mom or something. And she said I feel like she was pretty sure that if she spoke up that her parents wouldn't believe her. And
Mhm.
looking back at the way that her family was, I think she was 100% right. I don't think that they would have believed her if she spoke up. And so this specific situation actually ended our friendship that I had since day one of elementary school. I couldn't go spend the night with her anymore out of fear of it happening again. Also, I did never tell my parents or her mom when I was asked not to. I eventually did tell my parents that it happened, but I was already an adult, so there's really nothing that could have been done. And I wish she would have spoke up sooner, or wish somebody would have spoke up sooner, because not even his own kids came to see him anymore. And so I
Mhm.
really wanted to get a hold of his daughter, who's our age. I really wanted to get a hold of her and be like, is there like a certain reason you and your brother don't hang out with your dad? Because they never hung out with him. And so he's still out there free to do this, and who's to say that he's not going to do it again? And
Yeah.
the the friend that I'm speaking of actually did cut off contact with this stepfather, and it leads me to wonder whether did she speak out? So like outside of her mom still being married to him, he is not really in the picture. And there was a this person has an older sister who also did not want anything to do with the stepfather, and I didn't know why either. And so, but they I think like her older sister would have definitely said something if it happened to her, or she just got the wrong vibe from him or something. So I just don't have it in me to ask her if she spoke up about it yet. And her friendship is a thing in the past now. And that friendship was really hard to move on from. She was literally
Mhm.
like family to me. And what her stepfather did, it took away friendship and so much more. I know that there are a lot of people out there with similar stories to mine, and I hope that if it isn't too late, you speak to somebody about it and break the silence. Even if you fear that people you tell won't believe you and will assume that you're lying, please reach out to us and any peer support that you have. And I'm a certified peer support specialist, and your story does matter, and you don't deserve to be stuck dealing with something like this alone.
I completely agree with that. Selena, I am so truly sorry that that ever happened to you. I do remember you telling me about it in high school, but it was something I wasn't expecting. And I don't think you were prepared to tell it honestly, because it was kind of like in passing. It wasn't really something we were talking about. It was just like, oh, yeah, I was sexually assaulted when I was younger. And that was all. That was like the whole thing. And I know that that's very common for children and teens to do, is to brush it off like it's not a big deal so that they can continue to push it down and make it out of sight, out of mind. And I truly hope that her mother did not actually stay with that sick individual. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm fortunate enough to not have that type of trauma in my life. But I am going to share some statistics on abuse that I would like to share after hearing your story, and stories that I know of other people and with people that I've worked with. These come from doorways, sva.org. children exposed to abuse. So that does not matter if they've been abused or just witnessing it. They're at an increased risk of trauma and trauma-related side effects. Some common effects that children can have range from physical to mental. A lot of times, children can be hurt when they're trying to protect a parent from abuse, and they may also suffer from stress related ailments like headaches or rashes and things like that, that people that maybe have a high anxiety or high stress rate can have. They can also take their aggression out on others and on peers around them to alleviate the stress that they have from the situation. But children see the consequences of abuse after it's occurred. So even if they didn't physically see the abuse happen, they can observe bruises, torn clothes, broken objects, splintered furniture, holes punched in walls, swollen faces, puffy eyes, and they can perceive the tension and fear of the abuser, and they do not feel safe. And unfortunately, 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of those children are eyewitnesses to the violence. And children are particularly vulnerable as both victims of and witnesses to domestic violence, sexual abuse, and assault. In order to break the cycle of violence, I feel that there needs to be a lot more services provided to not just the families, but also to the actual children that have witnessed a parent or guardian, even a sibling being abused, because a lot of times those services go to the person who was the abused person, and it's not going to those around them that may have been affected. But the rate of child abuse or neglect in a home where domestic violence is prevalent is 1,500% higher than the national average. Children impacted by domestic violence, they stand a greater chance of experiencing neglect, and more than half are also physically abused themselves. So either directly or indirectly, witnessing the abuse can significantly inhibit a children's physical, cognitive, psychological, and social development. But most of the time, they can be caught in the crossfire of this happening. And additionally, which listeners, I am going to be sharing a lot on this topic because this is something that I'm very passionate about. So if this is anything that you've ever experienced or you know somebody has experienced, please reach out. We do have links in our link tree. But additionally, many children living in a home where abuse is occurring, they're being abused themselves. And according to the National Library of Medicine, neglect is the most common form of child abuse. And if you think about it, if you yourself are being abused by the person who is supposed to love you, how can you also correctly care for your child? And that's a very hard thing to wrap your head around because you are just in survival mode. And a lot of times your children do get those effects of that. But the second most common type of abuse is physical for children. Other types of abuse are psychological and sexual abuse, but rib fractures are the most common injury with physical abuse for children. And verbal abuse is the most common of the psychological abuse. So verbally putting down a child, manipulation, things like that. But according to RAINN, RAINN, every 9 minutes, Child Protective Services substantiate a claim of child sexual abuse. And that is just too high. Every 9 minutes. To break that down further, of all victims under age 18, 2 out of 3 are ages 12 to 17. And I'm not exactly sure how old you specifically were when what happened to you happened, but I would assume you probably fell within one of these age ranges because
You are correct.
34% are under the age of 12. 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 20 boys under the age of 18 will experience sexual abuse or assault in their lifetime. Child sexual abuse can affect mental health long term. They can children that have experienced sexual abuse are 4 times more likely to develop a drug addiction. They're 4 times more likely to experience PTSD as an adult, and they are 3 times more likely to experience major depressive episodes as an adult. And only 7% of all sexual abuse is perpetrated by a stranger. That means most of it is by family or acquaintances. So you're not going to most of the time walk out on the street and have a child snatch your child up, or an adult snatch your child up and abuse them. But I think that we need to be aware, be informed, and be protective of our children, no matter the lengths that we need to go, because these statistics are way too high. And not only for children, but for adults as well, because more so with children, more so with adults, according to doorwaysSVA.org, every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. So if you think about that, every 2 minutes, that's 2 people. That could be 2.5, okay? And 73 seconds is not a long time. And that is every single day. And women aged 12 to 34 are at the highest risk of rape and sexual assault. 1 in 3 women, and 1 in 4 men have experienced some type of sexual violence in their life. And unfortunately, Indigenous and Native Americans are twice as likely to experience rape and sexual assault as compared to other races. In fact, 41% of sexual assault against Indigenous peoples or Native Americans are perpetrated by strangers, which is just such a drastic change from it only being 7% for children, but for women, and specifically women of Indigenous or Native American background, it is 41% likely it will be committed by a stranger. And the CDC reports that more than 1 in 3 women and 1 in 3 men in the United States will experience intimate partner violence. You could be sitting next to one of them on the bus, on the train, going to work, and 1 in 3 teens, these are teenagers, these are children, experience dating violence in their life. And that ranges from physical, mental, and sexual abuse. And those who identify as non-binary or part of the LGBTQ plus community are often more likely to experience abuse. And not only that, Black women are 35% more likely to experience domestic violence than white women. While people of all income levels usually experience domestic violence, those earning lower incomes tend to experience domestic violence at higher rates than those in higher household incomes. Women with household incomes of less than $7,500 are 7 times more likely as women with household incomes over $75,000 to experience domestic violence. And like I said, those who are non-binary or LGBTQ are more often likely to experience the abuse, which is compounded by homophobia, transphobia, and just all around terrible people who are hating somebody for simply who they are. Transgender women who experience intimate partner violence were nearly 2.5 times more likely to experience sexual violence and nearly 4 times more likely to experience financial abuse than survivors who did not identify as transgender women. And I would just like to say, if you're listening to us, transgender women are women, and I believe that they should be protected the same as anybody else. But the national statistics show that at least 45%, so that's almost half of domestic violence survivors, report also being sexually assaulted by their abuser. These statistics speak for themselves. No one's safe from experiencing some sort of trauma-inducing violence in their lifetime. And if you are experiencing that violence, please reach out to someone immediately, because you are not alone. You are validated, and you do not deserve what has happened to you.
No, Tori, there's a lot of statistics you threw out there that makes so much sense when you think about it. And like the most people that are abused or assaulted are by people that they know. And I have somebody in my family who had that happen to them, and it was their uncle. Her direct uncle did it to her. And like I said, the guy who did it to me, I trusted him. And he was my best friend at the time's stepdad, and I trusted him, and I should never have trusted him. I saw on Twitter the other day there was a mother posting for advice on whether, or just simply asking what age they allow their children to stay the night somewhere. And a lot of the comments said that do not allow your child, if they're
Mm-hmm.
much younger, to stay the night somewhere where there is no woman presence.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember staying the night at that same friend's house, her real dad, and I was uncomfortable. I didn't see him as an abuser, but it was just really uncomfortable for me because there wasn't a woman present. And
Mm-hmm.
and with the stepfather of this friend, she was present. There was her mother was present, and it just happened when had conveniently happened when everybody was asleep,
Mm-hmm.
which is terrible.
I'm one of those moms that I will never allow my child to do sleepovers. They will not be going to sleepovers. Maybe once they're 17, 18, and like they can defend themselves, or I know for sure they will be able to come and tell me. My children will not be doing sleepovers at all. And I know that that's something that people might not agree with.
Mhm.
Um, but like I said, we need to go to any length possible to keep our children safe. And one of those lengths is not allowing sleepovers.
Yeah, and it is just so like the statistics you read off are just so bad and
Mhm.
horrifying. And I feel like you're making the right decision by doing that, but I've seen people also kind of counteract that and try to help that with Life 360. Do you know what that is?
Mhm. Yes, I
I've
do. I do, but like with me, we don't use that, and also my children, they're not old enough to have phones. So
Right.
my thing with knowing where they're at, that does not mean that I know what's happening where they're at. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah. Would you allow them to have friends stay the night at your house?
Most likely, yes. We've never actually had a friend stay the night at our house, but my nieces and nephews have stayed a couple times, and
Mhm.
my oldest daughter does have one very trusted friend who is just her absolute best friend in the world. This child is the
Mhm.
sweetest. She's an angel. And I would probably allow her to stay the night once they get to, 8, 9 years old, but they're just not at that age yet. So I think there just has to be some sort of limit, like, okay, you can stay when you're this old. But
Yeah.
also this child is our neighbor. So
So you know them pretty well.
yeah, we know
So
them pretty well. But single mom. So it's kind of nice. I know her. Our kids are best friends. We're constantly
mhm.
messaging each other. I'm actually pretty sure this child's at my house outside right now.
So
Um,
it's basically a family, like family friend kind of.
yes, yes. And I've known this mother. We went to school with her for years.
Mhm.
But that's one child I do like. She could stay for a week if she had to,
Mhm.
because that's a little bit different. It's like a family
Yeah,
thing. But yeah.
yeah. I get it 100%. And do you remember when like people would babysit and like the dads would take home the babysitters that were females, like the dads would drive
Yes.
them home even if the mother was there. And
Mm-hmm.
I just find that just
Creepy.
disgusting. Like, yeah, how what do you do? What do you talk about with this old ass man, like
Yeah.
that you babysat their children? And I don't understand why mothers wouldn't step in and take that's just like you're not a
Mm-hmm.
girl's girl and you're not protecting her no matter how trusting you think your husband is or your spouse of any kind. You may believe he wouldn't hurt a fly, but
Mm-hmm.
you you can't see it. And they always say, oh, it couldn't have been my husband or it couldn't have been my spouse, they would never do something like that, and he has two daughters and blah blah blah. Well, it's the person you least expect it to happen.
Yes. And one thing I'm going to pull from, I'm going to do a little shout out to my favorite podcast, which is Crime Junkie. I love you guys. They always say you never truly know a person. So no matter who that person is to you, you never truly know somebody until they show you who they really are.
Exactly, if they show you,
Exactly.
because people go under the radar without even being suspected or anything. I mean,
Hmm.
eventually they can't go well, maybe they could if the son doesn't want to speak up about it, just like in my
Mhm.
situation. Or I was protecting my friend. She did not want her parents to know. And I really truly believed it's because she felt like they wouldn't believe her. And
Mhm.
her situation was in the house that they lived in was really screwed up. And so I just feel like she was targeted just in all aspects. And it's just really, really sad.
Mhm.
And if my dad had known that happened to me, he literally would have unalived that person.
I can see him just full of rage.
Oh
He would
god.
have 100%.
Yeah, and he knows this friend's mom. Like they went to school together, they worked together at some point. So my dad knows now, but he doesn't know how to do anything about it now that I'm adult. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
but
I agree completely. I think I would go completely off the deep end and probably have to look really good in orange if somebody ever hurt my child because that would not. Nope. I'm a lunatic for a reason.
I'm gonna quote Eminem here. Blood is orange if you wash if you wash it once or twice, isn't it, Norman?
There's a
I
reason
can't
we're
remember
medicated.
can't remember what song that is, but it's on. I mean, I listen to it all day long. I don't care what the title of the song's name is, but I know every lyric. That's what's important. I'm a stan.
That is what's important. I must stand. Oh, we're too old to
Thank
be
you.
using that term.
I know. I know. Thank you so much for sharing those statistics with us because I think it's so important for people to hear those things and knowing that it did happen to me within the age range of the statistic that you read off to me. So I know that this is going to hit some people pretty hard, and I think it needs to. It really needs to
Mhm.
because parents need to take a step back and realize what could I do to protect my child in different ways when it comes to them having friends and going to their house, and what can I do to meet halfway, like with the
Yes.
girl that lives next door to you. You would trust her 100%, and they trust you 100%, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And you know, I also know that my mom used to call like my friends that I never had at my house before. She would call their parents because, like, for one, she knew her parents, or my mom knew
Mhm.
her dad actually, and she called and they had a conversation. And so it's just a matter of doing something like that. I think my mom did that because she wanted her dad to feel safe at our
Yeah.
house.
I agree.
So,
I actually think that the first time we hung out together, I want to say I stayed at your house, and your mom and my mom did call each other and
mhm,
talk to each other. I vaguely remember that. So it's just as simple as thinking before doing.
exactly. And doing whatever you can to protect your child in, those kind of situations. And we all hope that our own children would never go through something like that. But when it even happens at a school, just like it happened to us at school, it's
Hmm.
hard. It's really, really hard to keep that from happening and protect them from that. But I hope we keep moving in that direction because I've heard recently we've had a lot of counselors from higher higher counselors who have huge degrees like PhD and stuff like that. I've heard that they are going to come to our local schools and be
Oh,
a counselor, like the schools will still have a school counselor, but they'll have a mental health counselor outside of that. And I think that is an amazing thing that even where we live, that is an amazing resource
yes.
and an amazing thing. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but I've been hearing a lot about it. And
Well, I
also,
support that 100%.
yes, and also the National Alliance on Mental Illness has webinars that specifically deal with children trauma and identifying those your children who are suffering from trauma and at the abuse of their father or mother who may be abusing each other.
Mhm.
So there's definitely resources on that. And I love that they're actually webinars too, because
Yes,
you can always go back to them if you want. Mhm.
I agree
So I'm going to
completely. I
wrap
love a
this up.
webinar.
This was a really good, yeah. I think this was a really good episode. We had a lot of good things to share, and I hope you guys take a lot of things away from this episode. But I'm going to end it with, if you survived another day at war with your brain, you are superior, and we're wishing you nothing but peace in your soul, your mind, and another day of surviving until you find your way of living.
And we will see all of you lunatics in 2 weeks on Trigger Warning Podcast.